some of the best practices that I've developed is cutting back the tools. I think that's one of the first things that I would do is throw out the entire suite and, look at the house of quality, start at the bottom, and until you've perfected the bottom, don't work up.
Today, I'm excited to welcome Michael Parent to the show. Now, Michael, as you'll hear, has a solid background. He started learning about Lean and Six Sigma, kind of in a traditional production manufacturing environment, and then he eventually found himself in a human resources department, and that's where he's been applying Lean and Six Sigma. So what we talked about today on the show was how he's going about that and some of the tools that they're using. He's got an interesting approach on how he actually reduces the number of tools that he introduces to folks who are new to the whole Lean and Six Sigma thing. So really fun episode. Super humble guy, but super smart, as you'll hear. And show notes for this episode can be found over at gembapodcast.com. Just look for episode 339. Again, gembapodcast.com, and look for episode 339. Okay, enough for me. Let's get to the show. Michael, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm doing very well, thank you.
All right. Well, Michael, we like to begin all of our shows with our guest sharing a quote. So do you have one that you want to open up with?
Yeah, I do. It's by St. Thomas Aquinas,
nice.
Great thinker of the Middle Ages.
Oh, yeah.
And he said, it's better to illuminate than merely to shine, to deliver to others contemplated truths than merely to contemplate.
Wow. That's a new one for the podcast. I don't think anybody's ever quoted Aquinas, so that's pretty awesome. So what's that?
He's a pretty smart guy.
Yeah, he sure was. What was that? What's that quote mean to you?
Well, I think it gets to the crux of what we do is we're not just merely practitioners going out into the field and running, lean projects or putting process improvement in place. Mm-hmm. The real value that we add is so much more about imparting, these skills, these mindsets, even the tools, to really let other people do it themselves. And I think that's, a lot of what sometimes gets lost in translation, but also what we bring to the table.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, one of my very good friends, so I'm Catholic, so I know all about Thomas Aquinas, and he actually teaches an online class on the Summa on St. Thomas. So I'm gonna send him this podcast. He's gonna be so tickled that Aquinas got quoted on our podcast.
Yeah, good,
very good. All right, well, hey, Michael, tell us about your background and how you first got introduced to continuous improvement, and then what you're up to these days.
Yeah, so I'm only 30 years old, so I'm a relatively younger person practicing Lean Six Sigma. I went to the University of Michigan, got a degree in industrial and operations engineering. So a lot of what that curriculum was, a lot of the statistics, a lot of the quality engineering, and of course there was also like a lean component as kind of your technical elective you could take. Mm-hmm. So I'm also a bookworm. I read, at the time I was reading things like The Goal and In Search of Excellence, and then eventually got to The Toyota Way. So I guess I've kind of always had it from the beginning of my career, some inkling that I wanted to do Lean Six Sigma type stuff. Mm-hmm. I was working in manufacturing for a while. I eventually got around to a great organization that, did their own in-house Lean Six Sigma, even designed for Six Sigma stuff. So I was doing a lot of projects, leading a lot of things in the manufacturing space. I went to get my MBA while I was in manufacturing, and through the MBA, I realized that kind of what I liked about the business components, strategy, product development, even human-centered design was something that came up a lot in the MBA. These were things that I thought Lean Six Sigma could augment and also, move alongside. So I also thought that these things weren't, that readily available in the manufacturing space. So after the MBA, I was looking consciously for an opportunity to, use the Lean Six Sigma skills, use the background that I had, but apply it into some unique or novel business problems. So that's what I was doing. And I eventually found my way into human resources.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Okay. So yeah, and so obviously, going to kind of dive into your journey with Lean and Six Sigma and an HR organization. So maybe let's just kind of dig into that, and just talk about maybe the early experience you had applying Lean Six Sigma within an HR environment. Like how did you go about it in the beginning, and then maybe what are you doing now, if anything different?
Yeah. So, coming into it, it was, it's a bit of a culture shock. I don't know how many people out there have ever made that transition from like manufacturing into something that's got a much softer background, like human resources.
Mm-hmm.
One of the biggest challenges I faced is just the speed in which I could go. Manufacturing's got a history of engineers and kind of very technical components to it, even from a very early, onset of manufacturing. So there's a culture of just people being technically literate, understanding data, understanding how to make decisions with data.
Mm-hmm.
So that was something I really had to kind of reset my expectations to it. It didn't come up in the interview process or anything like that, surprisingly.
Mm-hmm.
But it was a little bit of a culture shock. So going about it from the start, it was a lot of gembaing because I quickly realized I was not, in my comfort zone. So it was a lot of, really trying to understand what other people were doing. And then also kind of being, a little bit of an apostle myself for Lean and Six Sigma methods, because these are folks who have never been exposed to this at any time beforehand. So you're doing a little bit of sharing what you do, but you're doing a lot of learning about what they're doing, because that's obviously going to make you a little bit better in what we're doing. So
Mm-hmm.
What I'm doing now to answer that second part of that question is really applying the Lean Six Sigma methods to a couple different areas. Talent acquisition is a great opportunity for human resources departments to really visualize a process of look, I need to get somebody who's a high quality candidate into my organization, and I need to do that relatively quickly. So mapping out that process with the recruiters, with the recruiting managers and the directors, and getting them to understand what their process looks like. That's just one problem in a handful of different projects I'm working on right now.
Yeah, that's kind of one of those classic HR style projects, because golly, sure. I remember back in my corporate days, there's some horror stories, you're trying to find, specific type of engineer or something like that. And boy, it can take a long time, and then you think you found them, and then all of a sudden it falls apart at the very end and get to start over again. So,
that's exactly right.
Yeah. So when there's actually, it's kind of like when people say lean accounting or lean in HR or whatever. So it's kind of like, it sounds like you're applying lean within the HR discipline. Is that right? Like, so you're working with HR professionals, trying to help them streamline their work, improve their work. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I would say that's accurate. I guess that's one of two components of what I do. I think one, straight rudimentary process improvement type stuff, teaching people lean. I think the other one is kind of operations management. A lot of these HR managers and directors, like I said, they don't have a background in operations management. And once they start thinking about their processes as operation, what they do is operations, you can kind of see the deer in the headlights look, and they don't quite know what to do about it. So a lot of that is, using the lean philosophy, using some other, best practices to create for them a KPI and really coach them up on how they ought to be running their departments.
Yeah. Well, even just concepts like Obeya or, just visual management, make your work visual, right? That can be very enlightening to folks in a front office environment who haven't always done that. Maybe they have a Salesforce dashboard or whatever locked inside their computer, but it's only there when you go click on the link, right?
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. Very good. So, Can you give, I mean, I'm curious, the staffing one is always interesting to me, and I won't ask you to, share any trade secrets or anything like that, but be curious to dig into that one a little bit. Like what are some of the things that you're seeing from a current state, map perspective?
Yeah.
I'd be curious to hear what you're learning there.
Yeah, so luckily my organization has worked with a benchmarking organization. It's by PwC. It's called I think Saratoga Institute. Saratoga something, but I think it's the institute.
Mm-hmm.
So they provide benchmark metrics which help us define what some of those KPIs ought to be,
Mm-hmm.
and then also help us with some efficiency measures, particularly with talent acquisition. Looking at time to approve is a big one. So you've got a requisition, you have to get it approved, and then sometimes something might happen and it has to get reapproved. So there you've got redundancy, you've got rework, and then you've also got a longer time to fill, which is kind of like your lead time for your entire process.
Mm-hmm.
So right now we're seeing like a very high elevated time to approve in some of our processes and some of our different business areas. So we're digging down into that. We're moving some things around in our process. If you think about it from a value stream mapping standpoint, those big blocks, sometimes, I'll just say one of those blocks is having a strategy meeting with the business line. So these are recruiters working with the business line, figuring out what exactly they want, how they're going to approach it from, a market standpoint, a labor market standpoint. These are conversations that probably can be had before the requisition is approved in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
So this is going to reduce rework. It's going to reduce, it's essentially quality in process, right? Is if we do this in the first part, we'll be able to have a much smoother operation downstream.
It's also similar maybe to like quick changeover, right? Internal, external, right? Do these things before the patient's on the operating table, right? So
yeah, and very, very much, something that we talked about is like having an intake model. So even before they request, before they request an open position, can they already answer some of these questions for us so that even this, this conversation, this strategy conversation can be much quicker.
Mm-hmm. Got it. So I know it's not easy. I mean, lean's not easy anywhere, right? It didn't matter, Oh yeah. Well, I remember hearing people talking to this person one time, and they said, "Well, if only I could build cars like Toyota, it'd be so easy." I'm like, "Yeah, because building a car every 60 seconds is easy."
Yeah, no problem, right? No complexity.
But let's dig in a little bit to some of the challenges that you face introducing these continuous improvement concepts within an HR environment. What's tough about it, and then maybe what kind of tools or approaches are you using to counter those obstacles?
Yeah, I'll say I think I might have hit on it a little bit already. Is kind of this legacy of people not being used to kind of anything lean, not just lean itself, but kind of the context of lean, thinking about things as operations, thinking about things as process. That's probably a universal truth for a lot of people, whether you're in manufacturing or not. But it's particularly acute in the human resources area. Maybe some of the things that I've done to help that is one of the big things is to cut back the tools. So, lean people, lean practitioners love talking about the tools, right?
Mm-hmm.
I used the Ishikawa diagram. I did a 5 why analysis. This will fall flat on the audience that I work with. It's so much more important to get buy-in. It's so much more important to get people to believe in what we're doing. Even if it, comes at the expense of that project would have been a lot better if we, I don't know, did a cause and effect matrix or something like that. It's so much, we're playing the long game, essentially. We're trying to build that foundation, build that culture, and then we can start adding the tools. Once we have that culture in place, the tools are just a means to an end. So specifically, some of the things that we've done is we've cut it back to 3 things. Waste identification. Can we teach people to identify and attribute waste to one of the 8 wastes? Standardization. Are we running a standard operation, and can we hold people accountable to the standard that we've set for them? And then finally, visual management is can we visualize the value stream? Can we visualize the value that we're delivering to our customer?
Ah,
So with all those things, if you think about it from like the house of quality,
mhm.
right? Those are right on the bottom.
Yeah.
That's the foundation. So we're not building the house yet. We're just laying the foundation.
Yeah. Well, golly, if everyone understood, waste and just constantly worked to, eliminate it, you'd be in pretty good shape, I mean, just
Yeah.
that alone. So, you talked about holding people accountable. So how do you balance that with the whole idea of, respect for people, where obviously respecting people just because you're holding them accountable, you probably are respecting them because you're holding them accountable. But how do you balance that, to not look like a tyrant or not look like you got a big hammer and if you don't follow my rules, you're in trouble, right? How do you go about that?
Yeah, I think you're right on that. Setting that standard is respecting people, right? Is because you're letting them know how we don't work at a country club. We work at a business. So
Hmm.
we're trying to hold people accountable to some level of achievement.
Hmm.
It's not really fair to not tell them what that is,
Yeah.
for it to be based on intuition, which is kind of how it was running before. Concretely, when we run some of these projects and as we're trying to roll some things out, is we've worked in to have a weekly meeting. We call it a cadence of accountability, where what they're doing is they're running an A3. So we tell them each week that you have to have this part of the A3 structured and done. And if you need any help, we can set up touch points. But this is what you're accountable to each week. And what we like about that is one, it imparts the lean wisdom that we want. It imparts the lean methods and the lean thinking of saying we really need to identify what the problem is, what we want to solve, understand what that problem is, and then finally, much later on, do the analysis phase. So we, lay out the formulation of the project that we're going to follow. We tell them explicitly how we're going to hold them accountable to it. And then we've got this weekly cadence of saying, okay, did you do it? If not, why not? What was in your way to kind of remove some barriers for them?
Yeah. I find that the weekly check-in, here at Gemba Academy, we've got various certification, lean practitioner, green belt, black belt, various certification programs, and all of them, the one thing that's consistent is our coaching, and we essentially insist now on in the past we were more kind of loose about, let us know when you need help, but it didn't work so good. So now we're like, no, listen, we need to talk every week, at a minimum every week, and then some folks we talk to several times a week, depending if they need the help, but just having that regular, like you called it, regular cadence, regular check-in makes all the difference in the world. And while we don't preach it as an accountability thing, I can't tell you how many times I've heard people say, you know what, Ron, I'm so glad that we do these calls because it does hold me accountable, right? And we always say, even if you had a rotten week and you didn't get anything done, I still want you to come onto the call. We're not going to beat you up. We're going to just try to learn from it, and then make a plan for the next 5 days. So for us, it's always, all right, what's the next step? What do you think's going to happen over these next 5 days? And then we go from there. So yeah, having that regular check-in process is so critical.
Yeah, and like you kind of laid it out too, is I'm just telling you the finished product of it. We stumbled along and finally figured out that that's what was going to work for us.
Yeah. Yeah. Very good. Very good. So, there's a lot. I mean, obviously, Lean and Six Sigma is being applied now the world over in just about any industry you can imagine. It's being used. So, but I would still say, I guess the non-traditional areas, maybe it's safe to say, well, maybe it's not safe to say anymore. I don't know. But, it can be sometimes a little harder, right? So what do you think's the potential for Lean and Six Sigma and just continuous improvement in general to be applied in these so-called non-traditional areas?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of potential. One of the things that I really liked about HR is there's a willingness to change and to try things new that I didn't quite find, in my experiences with manufacturing.
Mm-hmm.
Granted, there's a healthy amount of skepticism, but they can see the forest through the trees in a lot of areas. They've got kind of an organizational view, so there's tons of potential of getting people to think in terms of Lean and Six Sigma and operations management and applying that to their disciplines. I think, one of the things that really excites me is innovation and product development. And I know that that's kind of a buzzword, innovation now. But organizations are continually identifying that they need some way to continually produce innovation, continually produce something that's novel and creative and satisfies and delights the customer.
Mhm.
I haven't seen too much out there, as I read in journals and whatnot, that's talking about blending a lean approach with innovation and product development. I think, that would be a great, future endeavor.
It's funny. So, the episodes haven't even come out yet, but over the last few weeks, I've actually interviewed a couple people who talked about that very topic of innovation. We've had a guy on talking about, one guy was talking about how he's using cornflakes to design the texture on a ceiling tile, and so it's kind of a 3P lean approach, So yeah, I think you're right. It's a very important part of the life cycle of a product or service to apply lean to that part of it. And I think you're right. It's not as mature as obviously like the production side or anything like that. So yeah, that's really good. So, right now there's someone listening to this podcast who might be, in the, maybe they're in HR, or maybe they're in just a non-traditional, maybe a service-oriented business or job. What advice do you have for them as they get started with their lean journey?
Yeah, I would say, kind of some of the best practices that I've developed is cutting back the tools. I think that's one of the first things that I would do is throw out the entire suite and, look at the house of quality, start at the bottom,
Mm-hmm.
and until you've perfected the bottom, don't work up. I've looked at a couple case studies, and I think some other things that are really good best practices out there is creating a flagship process. Really, if you think about lean as delivering customer value and your own value stream, right? What are people getting value from you? And how are you demonstrating that? Maybe it's in an HR organization, maybe it's in some other organization. I think having a flagship process and being able to point back to that and say, we took that organization, that department from point A to point B, and we did it by using, this Lean Six Sigma, playbook. I think that is really, really helpful to demonstrate your value, to show the worth, and to show why other people might want to join in. Because like I did say, there is a little bit of that healthy skepticism,
Mm-hmm.
which you're going to find everywhere.
Yeah, for sure. Very good. One thing I was going to ask you about, but then I'll ask it now. It's a little bit out of order, but have you gotten into, because I know there's some folks within, what they would call the lean HR movement. Now there's a lean insert a name movement, right? There's but folks that HR professionals who are really into lean, they seem to be going down the road of the leadership side, right? Not just the tools, but just, developing lean leadership type skills. Have you kind of gotten into that yet, or are you planning to? What do you think about that?
Are you saying for me personally, or are you saying as we roll that out for the organization?
Yeah, well, maybe both, really. I don't know. But for sure, the organization, right?
I think at the end of the day, that's really where the value is added. Is
Mm-hmm.
It's not, I guess almost to make it full circle, right? It's not on putting the tools in place. It's not on doing little projects. It's about, creating a leadership culture.
Yeah.
One of the big difficulties, I don't know if it's a difficulty, but one of the things that we need to get in place in my organization is we need to get the line leaders involved. We need to get the recruiters, doing and saying, hey, submitting Kaizens, things like this, where they're empowered by their leaders who they themselves are empowered up the chain. That is something that has not happened yet within the organization. That would be absolutely transformative, as if we could get that, all the way from the senior vice president on down, where it's not just the buy-in, but it's the activity, it's the involvement. So that's very lean thinking, and like I said, we're kind of going at a more of a crawl than a walk at this point. So
Yeah.
that's part of my vision. That's something I'd love to get to, but I think that might be, in the distant future, maybe a 3-year plan or something.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think it sounds like you're going about it right, though, in my opinion. I mean, kind of starting at the foundation and working your way up the house, right? And
that's right.
Yeah. And getting that buy-in and, respecting people all the way through the whole process, which it sounds like you're doing by, reducing the number of tools that you're throwing at folks. That's a form of respect, right? Not trying to overwhelm them with how smart you are, right? So
absolutely.
Yeah. Very good.
Absolutely. They'd be underwhelmed too.
No, you sound like a smart guy. All right. Well, hey, Michael, what's the best way for folks to connect with you if they want to get in touch?
Yeah, I would say I'm on LinkedIn, and all you have to do is search Michael Parent. I'm sure in your show notes you could probably throw the link in there or something. But yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. That's the best way to reach me, and I'd be happy to connect with anybody.
Fantastic. Yeah, we'll put it in the show notes. This is episode 339. So gembapodcast.com. Just go to 339 and we'll link to Michael's LinkedIn there. So, well, hey, it's fun having you on the show. Thanks for coming on. And maybe we'll have you on down the road and you can tell us about all the amazing endeavors that you've done there within your organization.
Yeah, it'd be a pleasure. Thanks, Ron.
All right. You take care. Thanks for listening. Whether you've been on the continuous improvement journey for many years, or perhaps you're just getting started, Gemba Academy is here to support you. And while we're best known for our more than 1,500 Lean and Six Sigma teaching and virtual tour videos, we also have a team of experienced Lean and Six Sigma practitioners available for one-on-one coaching, as well as a variety of Lean and Six Sigma certification options. To learn more and to schedule a demo, head on over to gembaacademy.com.